In this segment, we're going to repair wood rot that's attacked the bottom of a patio door. The framing system houses the door and a separate window, and replacement will be expensive, so I'm going to cut out a piece of rotted wood in the frame and replace it with a new piece.
The first step is to remove the trim on the outside of the door. This type of trim is known as brick molding. The easiest way to remove it is to cut through the paint at the edges with a utility knife, and then tap the end of a pry bar into the joint with a rubber mallet until the brick molding begins to loosen. I'll lift up the trim to a point where I can get in and cut the frame comfortably without removing the trim completely. Next, I'll remove the trim on the inside of the door. Once again, cut through the paint at the joint between the wall and the trim. This will leave a nice clean paint line as opposed to a ragged paint line where the trim meets the wall. You can use a hammer to loosen the trim, but the metal on metal sound is jarring to the senses. The rubber mallet makes a softer sound, which makes the work more comfortable. The weather stripping on the inside of the door can simply be pulled out of its channel and moved out of the way. Now we're ready to remove the rotten wood from the door frame. Select a good section of the wood a few inches above the rotted section and use a set square to draw a line. It's important that your line is square. I'll use a circular saw fitted with a wood blade to cut out the bad piece of wood. With the saw unplugged so that you don't hit the trigger and start the machine by mistake, set the depth of the blade to the thickness of the frame. Then plug in and align the blade with the cut line. I'm in a pretty awkward position, kneeling down and bending over, so I'm going to line the saw blade up, start the machine and drop it into the cut, making the cut very accurate. The rotten piece comes out very easily, and now we can see how bad it is. Fortunately, the wood behind the frame is okay, so I'm just going to replace the piece that I've taken out. I'll use non-rot frame material, which is available at most of the larger home stores, for the job. This is a plastic composite, which can be cut and drilled and painted and sanded just like wood, and being made of plastic, it won't rot in very wet conditions. To get the correct size, simply slip it into the space and make a mark on each side where the new piece will join the existing door frame. I'll cut the piece in a miter saw set to 90 degrees on all planes for a perfect cut. That fits pretty well, so let's drill a few holes to take the screws. I'm using a countersink bit in my drill, so that the screw heads will be below the wood surface, and I'll fill the holes later for a neat finish. 2.5-inch rust-resistant screws will do the job quite well, going deep enough into the half studs to give the new piece great strength. I'll insert the screws to a point where they hold the wood in position, without tightening them completely. Now I'll take a few wooden shims and cut them to the width of the frame. Just score them with a utility knife and snap them to size. I'll slide a couple into the gap at the bottom of the piece and tap them in to a point where the frames line up. And then I'll do the same at the top. In this way, I can very accurately line up the new piece with the existing frame. Now I'll tighten the screws fully to create a very strong joint between the new piece of door frame and the house stud behind. We're close to finishing the job, and the trim on the inside and outside of the door can be tapped back into position. Insert a couple of new nails to secure the trim to the new piece if necessary. I'll use a water-based exterior caulk to seal the edges of the trim and the joint between the new piece that I've inserted and the old frame. By running a wet finger up the joint, the caulk will smooth out perfectly, giving you a good finish. A coat of paint will complete the job. It's cost about $80 for materials and should take about 2 hours if you've never done it before.
If I'd installed a new door and frame, we'd probably be looking at a much higher bill of around $500 to $600 in materials and labor. That's quite a lot of money saved.